This is not the kind of video I think a lot of folks are going to expect out of me when it comes to this subject. So I would encourage you guys to stick around for the whole video to get a full understanding of where I'm coming from when it comes to my mindset. And maybe you'll actually agree if it's too much, like if you just can't stomach it, like if your soul is screaming, no, then I would recommend you dislike the video and then have a nice one. But if you're willing to stick around and get the full scope of where I'm coming from, awesome. Because I'm pretty sure that when it comes to this discussion, this is not what most folks are going to expect when it comes to the topic at hand. And this topic, obviously, is Zoro versus Sanji. Now, I waited for this moment to drop in the anime because I wanted to see how we worked on the anime. And of course, I myself consider the manga to be the primary canon for most series, whether it's One Piece, whether it's Hunter x Hunter, whether it's Naruto, Dragon Ball, and so on. The primary canon, the canon that you should gauge this stuff off of, is the manga and not the anime. The anime is just an interpretation of the manga at the end of the damn day. However, I was very curious to see where the anime adaptation went with this. And after this moment, in both manga and in anime, it is, in my mind, at this point in time, Sanji jumped a tier, at least a tier, ahead of Zoro in combat ability. Now, first of all, combat ability is basically my way of interpreting how strong a character is. Because physical strength is, of course, just one component of a person's combat pool. A person has skills, a person has abilities, a person, of course, intelligence, stamina, speed, durability, and so on. And because of the Raid Suit power-up, my argument essentially is that Sanji's capabilities jumped a whole tier ahead of Zoro at that point in time. Now, I understand that what I'm saying here is against the grain. Trust me, believe you me, I understand that I'm in a vast minority, which is fine by me. From my perspective, I can coherently explain it in full detail, my full thought process to why this is the case. And there has not been any definitive statements by Ichiro Oda himself, and I'm pretty sure he does like the conversation flowing on the topic at large, which does help as well. Before we get into the post-time skip as to how we got here with Sanji and Zoro, let me go back to the pre-time skip. And a lot of these talking points I have said before in other videos, but I haven't seen any concrete talking points that really go against these notions. So I'm going to continue to use them until otherwise. And of course, I'm talking about the Monster Trio pre-time skip, Sanji, Zoro, and Luffy. My mindset in the pre-time skip has always been that Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji are on the same tier when it comes to combat ability. Now, I've always given the edge to Luffy, but Zoro and Sanji were not really that far behind to where I could say that they were a full tier weaker than Luffy. One of the main things here, of course, is the 3 versus 3, where you have the Monster Trio versus the 3 strongest in an organization. Luffy fights the strongest guy, the raid boss, the big baddie. Zoro tends to fight the 2nd strongest guy, and Sanji tends to fight against the 3rd strongest guy. Sanji tends to have the easiest time among the Monster Trio. Zoro has a harder time, and then Luffy has the hardest time. A very good example of this is, of course, Alabasta, where in Alabasta, Sanji can walk away from Bone Clay with injuries, but not as dire injuries as Zoro, where Zoro had actually get stronger during that fight, and Zoro was a bloody mess. But Luffy actually lost to Crocodile 2 times before defeating Crocodile on the 3rd try. And even though Luffy was doing relatively well against Crocodile on the 2nd time round because of Mizu Luffy, if not for that lucky shot into the air where it came back and actually moisturized Luffy's body, Luffy would have died right then and there. So that is a good example of the 3 versus 3, where you have the Monster Trio against the 3 top guys in a set organization. Now, there is one exception where, in the case of Arlong Park, Zoro takes on the 3rd strongest guy in Hachi. Hachi can still move for a period of time afterwards, but winds up succumbing to his wounds. And then Sanji fights the 2nd strongest guy in Kurobi, who has a bounty higher than Hachi. Again, you look at Jabra, Kaku, and Rob Lucci. Sanji fought against Caulifla before Jabra and could still beat Jabra, even though in base form he was only 10 Doriki behind Kaku. By the same time, he was a carnivorous Zoan, while Kaku was a herbivore Zoan. And the carnivorous Zoans tend to have more offensive power and are more ferocious than the herbivore Zoans, of course, given their natural tools. A good example of this actually would be, let's say, the Beast Pirates or the Animal Kingdom Pirates, where you look at the top 4 strongest guys in that crew. Jack and Queen are herbivore-based Zoans, whereas King and Kaido are more of carnivorous-based Zoans. And again, Sanji beat Jabra easier. He had an easier time against Jabra than Zoro did against Kaku. And of course, with Rob Lucci and Luffy, that was just an all-out war. Now, another way to view the portrayal of, let's say, Zoro and Sanji in the pre-time skip outside of the 3v3 fights would be both Zoro and Sanji got knocked out twice by Enel in Skypiea. Sanji was actually done relatively off-screen. For the first time he got knocked out, and Zoro actually fought against Enel, and he lost after he got the Kitten. However, in the second time, Sanji disrupts the Arc Maxim, saves Usopp, and then takes a huge L4 before thanking Enel for lighting his cig and then passes out. While Zoro gets one bolt after he cuts the section of the Giant Jack. And he passes out again. Another example would be Zoro fights against Oars Luffy one-on-one to test out his new sword for a period of time. But Sanji fights against Oars Luffy one-on-one first. He is the first person to fight against Oars Luffy one-on-one, and Sanji is in a relatively worse condition than Zoro at that point in time. And then to piggyback off of that statement, Zoro and Sanji are both active after Kuma does the Ursa Shock. However, Sanji is active despite being, again, in a worse condition than Zoro is at that point in time. Meaning, before Zoro took Luffy's pain, if you reread Thriller Bark, you can clearly tell that Sanji actually took more damage throughout the entirety of Thriller Bark than Zoro did. So right there, I'm mentioning a few key points as to the comparison between Zoro and Sanji and how equal they are in terms of their pre-time skip quote-unquote power. Their overall combat ability. I don't want to spend too much time with the pre-time skip. Let us then go over to the post-time skip, because the post-time skip are the meat and potatoes. And essentially, the reason why I went over all of that in the pre-time skip is to kind of hone in the notion that in the post-time skip, this concept between Zoro and Sanji is still the same. So, let's go through the run-through. We do see Zoro and Sanji fight against each other a bit in Shibuya Archipelago as like a gag fight, but it's not something that I would take too seriously. But do note that at the beginning of the time skip, one couldn't outdo the other when it came to their little skirmish on Shibuya Archipelago. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I would argue that Sanji had a better showing on Fishman Island than Zoro did. Now, Zoro did show various things that were very impressive. So, number one, when they're going down to Fishman Island, Zoro shows off his new Ogi, the Crossing of Six Paths. He does an improved version of the Onigiri and the Dragon Twister. We have the Black Rope Dragon Twister, where it can actually stay there for a longer period of time. And then also we have the Rengoku Onigiri, where the Rengoku Onigiri has like a bit of like a shockwave kind of thing going for it, where it does seemingly more damage. And from here, we can make parallels between Fishman Island and Arlong Park, where on Fishman Island, his Rengoku Onigiri is cutting through Hyuzo, and Hyuzo's actually a better swordsman than Hachi, and the Onigiri cut through Hachi's swords. Going even further, Hachi practiced with 6 swords, whereas Hyuzo practiced with 8 swords. So again, the parallels between Hachi and Hyuzo, Fishman Island, and Arlong Park are clearly there. And in a way, one of the ways, of course, just one of the ways Oda is showing the growth of the Straw Hats is through these parallels. And I think Hachi even states before in the past that he could actually never beat Hyuzo in swordsmanship. Zoro's showing was pretty good on Fishman Island, but again, Sanji I think was better. So in the same vein, on looking at Arlong Park and Fishman Island, Arlong Park, Sanji had a problem with Kurobi, where Kurobi was able to do this water pressure based move, where he could actually plunge into the floor of the ocean where they were, and then Sanji's body started to cave in, and that was an attack that Kurobi used to get the one-up on Sanji. However, On the way to Fishman Island, Sanji would go from the bubble into the water, and that drastic change in pressure had no effect on Sanji's body. So Sanji's body's durability grew tremendously from Arlong Park to Fishman Island, obviously, because Sanji was able to handle those drastic pressure changes, whereas in the past, he couldn't handle that. And on that same note, on that same vein, even though it was around like double the amount of water pressure, it is noted that when Zoro tried to stop a underwater rock slide that was coming their way because of the underwater volcanic eruptions, Robin stopped Zoro from doing that. Right before Fishman Island, Robin stopped Zoro from going outside because of the water pressure. According to Robin, the water pressure would have killed Zoro if it actually gone outside. And of course, on top of that, he can use the Blue Walk skill to move freely underwater, even under that immense pressure as well. The next major thing for Sanji is his greater control of his element, his fire. Because in the pre-time skip, Sanji had to always spin his leg around in order to activate his double leg. However, in the post-time skip, just how Zoro is utilizing more Ogis, Sanji is showing a better control of his double leg ability. And to the point where he can actually activate that on will. Like not spinning around, but actually on will, which may have ties to some extent of arm and Haki. That's not confirmed, but it's been a theory I have for a very long time, where Ashura and Devil Leg have ties to Haki. That's a very old theory of mine. With that being said, Sanji can activate his Devil Leg without spinning at will. Not only that, but he also covers his entire body in fire in Hell's Memories, and Hell's Memories being like an Ashura-like final attack state for Sanji. And we see how with one kick, he could cover the entire body of Waratsume in fire and very efficiently char Waratsume's body. And then on top of that, we'll see that done underwater with the Kraken Tentacle with the grill shot, where he's able to activate his fire underwater, very similar to Red Hawk and Horty Jones, where the Red Hawk could burn Horty Jones despite being underwater. And then finally, another thing that's very similar to Luffy, when Luffy incorporated Soru for his Gear 2 moveset, Sanji incorporated Skywalk. When he learned the technique, that was a very big deal for him, and we even have a flashback moment of that when he reminisces about his training over the 2-year time skip. And then you have both Luffy and Robin note to how Sanji can fly, and they were in awe. So Sanji, during Fishman Island, showcased better things overall than Zoro did, in my personal opinion, especially when it came to Waratsume, because Waratsume was charred in one kick, essentially. Now, of course, I'm going to acknowledge that Jinbei got him up in the first place, but Jinbei didn't knock out Waratsume. Waratsume was still not only conscious, but focused on keeping the air inside of his body. And mind you, that was with the same attack that Jinbei used to knock Big Mom off the ship, the Vagabond Drill. So, as far as we know, Jinbei's greatest technique, the Vagabond Drill, his Ogi was not enough to knock out Waratsume, but in fact, it was Sanji's Hell's Memories that did the job. Especially when Waratsume wasn't even focused on the attack itself, but rather keeping the air inside of his body. So from that standpoint, I could argue that the Hell's Memories is superior than Jinbei's Vagabond Drill, caving in a bit of Waratsume's body and then setting him ablaze and charring it. Now, Punk Hazard, I would say that Zoro had a slightly better showing than Sanji did, because the context of this, I think, does matter greatly. So Usopp does help out Zoro to cut the dragon's head off with the Trampolia. And then after that, he does beat Monet after Toshiki starts to lose to Monet. Now, he could have killed Monet, but he chose not to kill Monet because of she's a woman, essentially. And Zoro, Frankie, Sanji, the only male character in the crew that I haven't seen hold back against women, for the most part, has been Luffy. But Luffy is seen as the most immature of the crew, so there is that spin on it as well. But that being said, he could have taken out Monet, but he did not. So these are the best showings for Zoro in the Punk Hazard arc. However, the people that Zoro deal with in Punk Hazard are far, far weaker than Virgo, who I would say is a tier stronger than Pika, Trebol, or Diamante. Sanji is able to take him on for a few clashes, and if the fighting continued, Sanji would have broken his leg, undoubtedly. However, it is important to note that his body was not in the best condition before fighting or clashing against Virgo. Now, albeit Sanji could still fight with that leg, but again, if the fighting continued, then that leg probably would have broken. A very similar thing happened before in the pre-time skip, where when Luffy gives the order to run away from Kizaru, Sentomaru, and the other pacifista, Zoro's unit, I think it's like Zoro, Brook, and Usopp, Zoro he's done. Because the effects of taking Luffy's pain and Thriller Bark are still affecting Zoro. And Zoro can't operate properly. And because of that, Sanji leaves Franky and Nami to go to Zoro's group to help against the pacifista that's nearing them. And then when he comes in there, I believe, he does another Devil Egg attack against the new pacifista. And then Sanji, after that attack on pacifista, he notes that if he does another attack like that, he's gonna wind up breaking his leg. So the damage and the exhaustion that Sanji and Luffy and Zoro had when they fought against that one pacifista as a group, as a unit, the entire crew was pretty much exhausted. Luffy and Sanji were also very exhausted as well after fighting the first pacifista as a crew. And then in comes Kizaru, Sentomaru, and another pacifista, and they're really wiped out. And so in this case, doing another Devil Egg attack would have been detrimental to his legs. So this concept of damage accumulating does exist in One Piece. Like other examples would be like Whitebeard or Little Oars Jr., where they were clean as all hell when they hopped in, but because of the damage they suffered over the course of Marineford War, come the end of it, certain things that weren't a big deal now were a big deal. And then finally, on the case of Sanji against Punk Hazard, Nami, I think it could have been both Nami or Chopper, I forget exactly, but it was noted by at least Nami, that Sanji's body was relatively strong. When they were inside of Sanji's body and the kids were wailing on them and they were taking Caesar Clown's attacks, at least Nami noted to the durability of Sanji's body. And this is a dynamic between Zoro and Sanji that I find quite fascinating, because Sanji is a refined martial artist to where he spent almost a decade training in his martial arts style. And his martial arts style is something that he acquired under Zeff with Zeff's red leg style of martial arts. So that unique martial arts style of the red leg and the black leg styles of Kenpo only exists between Zeff and Sanji. Whereas Zoro's swordsmanship, especially the Santoryu, is less refined, because the vast majority of what Zoro has gone through has been self-taught in terms of his swordsmanship. Even though he does have some foundation, Santoryu is something that is particularly unique to Zoro and Zoro alone. There was no one there to teach him that. There was no one there to guide him through that, but more so he had to find his own way. With Nitoryu and Itoryu, we see as a child there is something there, but his main shtick is Santoryu, and Santoryu, he is alone on an island when it comes to that particular Kenjutsu. However, Zoro has weapons, whereas Sanji does not have weapons. Sanji has to put his body on the line in this case far more frequently than Zoro does, because that's just how they fight. So Zoro's swords at times break, or they get destroyed, but his actual physical body is fine. Whereas if Sanji fractures or break a leg, then that is far more of a detriment to Sanji in the middle of a fight compared to, again, Zoro losing a sword. And then quickly, I do know that some folks are going to disagree with the whole Virgo comment, but considering how, and if I need to do a Virgo video, I will. But considering how Virgo not only is the right-hand man of Doflamingo, he knows the Kenpo of the Rokushiki, so he did Genpo, he did Shigen, so he had very good technique and foundation. On top of that, he showed the best control of Armored Haki Hardening and Armored Haki compared to the other Doflamingo executives. And he could combine Rokushiki, his Tekkai, with Armored Haki Hardening. He combined Tekkai with Armored Haki Hardening, and then on top of that, someone like Law, who need to cut through an entire mountain range just to beat Virgo. Noting how Dofi said, or he alluded to, Haki being able to defend against Law's attacks, and yet Law cut through an entire mountain range just to cut Virgo in two. That to me indicates that Virgo was on a higher tier than the rest of the Doflamingo executives based on what they've shown. Pika, Trebo, and Diamante. So, if I need to do a Virgo video, I will. In the future, maybe. Maybe. So to wrap this point up, I would say, given the context at hand, given Sanji showing on Fishman Island, I would say that Sanji could have beaten Virgo if both Virgo and Sanji were at 100%. Though it would have been harder for Sanji to defeat Virgo than, let's say, Zoro beating Pika, but again, Virgo is stronger than Pika. And even though Law did one-shot Virgo, Virgo underestimated Law. He got overconfident in his haki, given their history, and then he got cut by Law's abilities. It is tremendously foolish to just bull rush Trafalgar D water. That is dumb. But I would say that if Virgo took that more seriously and actually tried to dodge Law's attack, it would have been a much, much harder struggle for Law to beat Virgo one-on-one. So at the end of the day, I would say once again, Sanji would have beaten Virgo one-on-one if both Sanji and Virgo were at 100% and no outside influences played a role in that fight. Now, in Dressrosa, at the very beginning, before Sanji and the other half of the crew leave for Zou early, I would say that Sanji and Zoro both did not have good showings against higher tier opponents. So in Sanji's case, Sanji ran to Greenbit, and on the initial attack, the first attack that Sanji does, Dofi comes out, a strong one has finally arrived. Then Sanji and Dofi clash for a bit, where Dofi clearly has the upper hand, but Dofi does do a named attack, and then Dofi has to block the Spectrum attack as Sanji rebounds, and then Dofi also notes to the strength of that attack as well, before stopping Sanji in midair with the strings. And as far as we know, those same things can stop Diamond Jozu's charge, and Diamond Jozu is one of the strongest that we've seen in One Piece. So, and the only person to actually break out of those strings that we know of for sure has been Luffy in Gear 4 Bowman. And then after that, Law comes in there to save Sanji. So the whole point here is that Sanji didn't do so hard against Doflamingo, true, but Dofi did acknowledge Sanji's strength twice, did a named attack against Sanji, and then on top of that, did the same thing that stopped Diamond Jozu. Now, in Zoro's case, it's Fujitora, who I think is stronger than Dofi for damn sure. Fujitora is able to pin down Zoro with one gravity attack, with one gravity well. Zoro breaks out of that by countering with an air cut, and then Fujitora notes to the power of the air cut, and that's it. But do note that after that one gravity attack, not even named attack, mind you, at least not in the canon manga or anime. In the games, it is named, yeah, fine. But that after that one attack, Zoro was bleeding, probably due to some type of internal damage that Zoro suffered because of Fujitora's gravity. So up until that point in time, both Sanji and Zoro do not do well at all against higher tier guys. And I would say that from a portrayal standpoint, it is relatively equal. Dofi did a lot more against Sanji than Fujitora did against Zoro. Now, I'm not saying that the fight couldn't continue. It could have continued, obviously. It's just that neither Zoro nor Sanji maxed down their power. Like, we didn't see Zoro pull out Santoryu Mega Ogi. We didn't see Sanji do Hell's Memories and so on. They just had clashes, and in those clashes, both of them looked relatively weak compared to Fujitora and Doflamingo, which makes sense to me because Fujitora is the goddamn admiral, and Dofi was coasting everybody. I mean, the man had no qualms at all, disregarding Aokiji, trying to kill Smoker, and then kicking Fujitora. He had no qualms whatsoever. So back then, it was very obvious to me that Luffy in non-Gear 4, Zoro and Sanji, and Law as well, were not on the same level as Doflamingo. No way. After that, Sanji and the Spiral Hat Pirates, or like whatever they were called back then, they leave for Zou. And then Zoro takes on Pika. Now, after Olympus throws Zoro, it's very similar to how Zoro needed the help of Usopp for the Trampolia to kill the dragon. Olympus has to throw Zoro. So one of Zoro's biggest issues repeatedly has tended to be his mobility, where Zoro is nowhere near as mobile as either Luffy or Sanji. But after he does the billion-fold tri-silicon, whatever it's called, he does the greater 3,000, or like the great 3,000 great thousand worlds. There we go. Like Zoro just, he goes on this speech, man. It's like, what are you talking about? What billion-fold what? It's crazy, but it's a damn good moment. And Pika has this giant stone statue structure cut in half. And then afterwards, when he finds the real Pika, and then he does the 3,000 worlds and cuts Pika down. And after that, Zoro's very pleased. He reflects on this with a flashback of sorts with Mihawk, and how if he were to infuse his blades with Haki, they wouldn't have broken like back then when he fought against Mihawk. However, do note that after defeating Pika, the giant stone structure was not actually completely taken care of by Zoro. Zoro, as far as you know, was incapable of taking care of the entire giant stone structure, and Elizabeth Oni had to come in there with the King Punch to finish the job. But note the theme here, very important. Note the theme, because there is a similar process by which Zoro and Sanji kind of showcase their biggest moments when it comes to their combat prowess. In Fishman Island, Sanji has a flashback in conjunction with his training, and then in that same arc defeats a large foe. He defeats Waratsume. Zoro in Dressrosa defeats a large foe, and then has a flashback in conjunction with his training in Dressrosa. Now in the anime, they give Zoro a little flashback in Fishman Island as well, but in the manga that does not exist. So again, on Fishman Island, Sanji's big moment with charring Waratsume, and mind you, at that point in time, Sanji's DC, which I note as destructive capability, surpassed Zoro's, because Waratsume is huge. According to, I think, the data books, he's like 80 meters tall, and then he was inflated. And even though he did slim down a bit because of the Vagabond drill, he was still somewhat inflated. And even still, his entire body was covered in fire in one attack. Very impressive. And yet, we have Dressrosa, to where Zoro cuts Pika in half. So, when it comes to their training and their big moments, both Zoro and Sanji had flashbacks to reflect on their training. The big moment for Sanji was the Skywalk, when he incorporated a Rokushiki technique, very similar to Luffy and Blue Note. And the big one for Zoro was Armor Haki, where I think before Dressrosa, actually, we never see Zoro utilize Armor Haki hardening a single time. Like, at least the actual visible black thing. I'm not too sure if I'm wrong on this one, but I believe, I could be wrong on this one, but I believe that we never see a visible Armor Haki hardening on Zoro's blade up until he defeats Pika. Now, what's also very intriguing here is when you look at the Yonko, Big Mom, and Kaido, they have influence in these arcs from the very beginning. So it just so happens that for Sanji, when it came to his big moment, Fishman Island is also Big Mom themed, or it has Big Mom influence. When it comes to Dressrosa, Dressrosa has more Kaido influence. Big Mom's crew come in on the Chandler ship outside of the country, but in of itself, Dressrosa and also Punk Hazard are more in line with Kaido rather than Big Mom. So you can see how Zoro and Sanji very subtly have themes and influences that are tied to Big Mom and Kaido. And then on top of that, after Whole Cake Island, Sanji gets the Raid Suit power up. And during Wano Country, Zoro gets Enma. Once again, Whole Cake Island, Big Mom, Wano Country, Kaido. So you see the parallels there. On the topic of Whole Cake Island, I'm of the mindset that because of him off-screening Yonji, I would say that if not for threats of Zeph, he would have been his other brothers, Ichiji and Niji, as well. And of course, if not for the emotional ties as blood-related father and son, he would have been Judge as well. So all in all, at the end of the day, now that you've hopefully gotten a clear understanding on my position, whether you agree or disagree, I would argue, and I think I've done so relatively well, at least when it comes to the story side of things. Because here's the thing, right? If I had to focus this video on the feats, if I had to focus this video on the feats, oh boy, that's a whole other can of worms. And I figure it'd be a much better thing to focus more so on the story element of this topic rather than the feats of this topic. However, in the future, I am all for focusing on the feats, but we'll save that for another time. Yes, indeed.
Now go ahead.
I would argue, and I think I've done so relatively well, at least when it comes to the story side of things, that portrayal-wise, Zoro and Sanji, in both pre and in post time skip, have been shown to be relatively on the same level of power in the same tier. And this continues up until the Raid Suit moment in Wano Country, where Sanji has to now jump a tier ahead of Zoro Because essentially, Sanji's power-up just comes first. His power-up comes first. And later on in the arc, Zoro gets his new sword as well. But the fact remains is that because Sanji got his power-up first, Sanji at that moment was stronger than Zoro. Definitively. Definitively. And as Wano Country progresses, I believe that Zoro will get the Nikatetsu. I believe that Sanji will get the modification of the raid suit. And this is the arc where we should see the full capabilities of Zoro and Sanji. For the time being, I think it still stands, and it still stands relatively strong. Sanji and Zoro on the same tier. But Sanji did surpass Zoro when he put on that raid suit. 100%. But I'm going to catch you guys and gals later. Let me know your stance on the subject matter at hand. If you did watch all the way through, thank you very much. You're awesome. Appreciate that. Really damn do. Be sure to rate the video. It is not that hard to do. I guarantee you that, because I know that you all have a device called Zamaoshu. You use Zamaoshu to click, rate the video, to click, subscribe, to click on that bell to join the squad. And of course, as always, feel free to please do, once again, let me know your stance. Comment in the comment section down below. Peace, and have a nice God damn day.